For some of us, writing is hard, irritating, dumb, and in ancient times, blasphemous. However, this has never been the case for myself. To me, writing is like being with long-loved family members. There is always a sense of comfort that I feel around them, just as writing brings me comfort, allowing me to fully express myself through creativity. I did struggle a lot this semester though. The analytical writing process of 1102 challenged me to constantly relay evidence back to my thesis, and transitions killed me. As I continued to engage in the class, I eventually began to see improvement in my writing and how important English 1102 was to my future academic life. My first paper, entitled Why Exaggerate, was about a poem called The Exaggeration of Despair by Sherman Alexie. This poem, like all of the other assigned readings, was based on a culture different from the traditional American society. In the poem, the narrator recounts some past events of his family and other Native Americans that at first seem so tragic they could possibly be considered exaggerations. However, they are not. Around the time of writing the paper, my grandmother was having health problems, so I automatically was able to relate with the family ills that the poem portrayed. Though since I was able to relate to it, that did not mean I had an easy time writing it. Being that it was my first paper, I was very uncertain about how to interpret it or even how to write a paper analytically. Fortunately, many assignments were given like the 10-on-1 method that helped to ease my way back into the writing process and develop my thesis. My second paper, Prolonged Journeys, was the work of two separate short stories, The White Horse by Nguyen Ba Tra and Woman Hollering Creek by Sanderson Narrows. This paper presented a challenge for me because not only was I analyzing two stories, but also tying evidences of the two stories back to my one thesis. Both of these stories were found to be the topic of searching for self-identity, and I chose to intertwine that theme with family. Both characters, Mr. Nguyen and Cleophilus, were also family-oriented people. By this time in the semester, I was getting more comfortable with the writing process until I made my first multi-model. The multi-model was an extremely difficult task, but the more time I spent working with it, the easier it became. The multi-model presented me with a way to add creativity to my paper by watching it come alive or flop dead in a voiceover format. Being a sophomore, the format for English 1102 was quite different than the terror tales told to me by close friends who apparently suffered through it last year. Peer reviews were increasingly helpful as I was not only allowed to see my mistakes that my other classmates were making, but also learn from them and hopefully transfer some of that knowledge into my own paper. I took pride in helping my classmates with their papers, encouraging them to always keep up the good work. Another format structure I learned a great deal from was drafts. Most of the time I had to write 3 different drafts, not including a final, for each paper. These required drafts allow for me to fix my errors with transitions and also help me to develop my evidence that would eventually relate back to my thesis. Without this type of formatting, I can definitely see myself as an inferior writer. For my wildcard, I chose to create a multi-model about a man struggling with suicide. I've always been intrigued by the idea of suicide and what makes a suicide successful. The man in my story has a wife and daughter who seem to care for him, yet he cares nothing for himself. As the story carries on, I provoke questions of uncertainty for the man's family after his simulated passing. Unlike my other multi-models that encompass a wide variety of pictures, this one only has colors. English 1102 has opened my eyes to the basic analytical writing concepts that I would have therefore missed without taking it. The multi-model and multicultural aspect of the class presented a breath of fresh air from the normal formatting of English classes. Thanks to English 1102, I now have a foundation that will only allow me to progress throughout my academic career.